It was a calm afternoon when Salina Gomes stepped out into her garden, hoping for some quiet time away from the busy world. The sun was shining brightly, and the soft breeze made the flowers sway gently. Her garden was her escape, a peaceful place where she often took a moment to relax. As she strolled through the garden, her eyes landed on something unusual. A dog, a scruffy, curious-looking dog, was digging furiously in one of the flower beds. The dog's paws were moving quickly, scattering dirt everywhere. Salina paused, wondering what it was looking for. She'd never seen this dog before. The dog was so focused on its task that it didn't seem to notice Salina walking closer. She stood by the flower bed, watching it for a few moments. The dog was digging deeper, its small body almost completely hidden under the pile of dirt it was moving. "Hey there," Salina said, leaning down to get a closer look. The dog looked up for a second, its eyes meeting hers, but it didn't stop digging. Salina stepped forward, now more curious than ever. What was this dog after? It had been digging for quite a while and didn't seem to want to stop. She squatted down next to it, hoping to see what it was uncovering. The dog paused for a moment, looking at Salina as if deciding whether to let her in on its secret. Then it returned to digging, its paws frantically pushing the dirt aside. Salina watched in silence, her curiosity growing with each passing second. After a few more moments, the dog finally stopped digging and backed away slightly. It seemed satisfied with its work. Salina looked down at the hole the dog had made and noticed something shiny poking out of the soil. At first she thought it might just be a rock, but as she cleared away more dirt, she realized it was something more. It was a rusted metal box, partially buried beneath the earth. Salina's heart raced as she reached down and pulled the box free from the dirt. The dog sat nearby, its tail wagging slowly, as if watching Salina to see what she would do next. The box was old, its surface covered in dirt and grime. But there were intricate carvings along the edges, making it look more like a treasure than a random object. Salina's mind raced. How did this box end up in her garden? And why had the dog been so determined to dig it up? It didn't make sense. She carefully brushed the dirt off the box, examining it closely. It was heavy, and the carvings looked like they had been there for years. But the most intriguing part was that it had a small, locked clasp. "Seems like you found something important," Salina said, her voice soft as she looked at the dog. The dog barked once, as if agreeing with her. Salina stood up and held the box in both hands, looking around the garden. She wasn't sure what to do next. Her peaceful afternoon had just turned into a mystery. "What now?" she muttered, still unsure of where this would lead. She glanced back down at the dog, who was now sitting calmly at her feet, tail wagging. With a deep breath, Salina made her decision. She would open the box. The dog had found it for a reason, and she wasn't about to leave it unopened. She carefully tucked the box under her arm, ready to go inside and find a tool to open it. As she walked back toward her house, the dog followed her, staying close, as if guiding her toward the next step of the mystery. Salina felt a rush of excitement mixed with curiosity. What could be inside this box? Was it a long-forgotten treasure, or something far more unusual? The dog continued walking beside her, tail wagging. Salina smiled, feeling an unexpected connection to the stray dog that had led her to this discovery. The day had just taken a turn, and Salina couldn't wait to see where it would go next. Salina stood in the doorway, holding the rusty metal box that the dog had uncovered in her garden. Her mind raced with questions. How had the box ended up in her garden? Why had the dog been so determined to dig it up? What was inside? She needed to find out, and she knew she couldn't wait. The dog, now sitting by her feet, watched her closely, its tail wagging. Salina looked down at it, still a little surprised by the dog's focus on the dig. "You sure know what you're doing," she said, bending down to give the dog a quick scratch behind the ears. The dog responded with a soft bark and a wag of its tail, as if pleased with the compliment. Salina walked into her house, holding the box carefully in her hands. She set it down on the kitchen counter and stared at it. It was old, the metal dark and covered with dirt, but the carvings on the sides were intricate and unusual. It looked like it belonged to another time, maybe even another world. She reached for a pair of pliers from the drawer, deciding it was time to open the box. The clasp was locked, and the metal felt cold to the touch. It seemed almost as though the box had been untouched for years. She ran her fingers over the carvings again, wondering what secrets it might hold. The dog, following her inside, stood by the counter, watching her every move. It seemed calm now, but Salina couldn't help but feel that it was waiting for something to happen, like the dog knew something she didn't. With a steady hand, Salina took the pliers and began working on the clasp. She pulled and twisted, trying not to damage the box, but the rust made it difficult. After a few moments of effort, she finally heard a soft click. The box was open. Salina held her breath as she lifted the lid. Inside, she found stacks of yellowed papers, their edges curled from age. At first glance, they seemed like nothing more than old letters, forgotten and abandoned. She lifted one of the papers, noticing that the writing was faded, but there was something strange about it. It didn't look like any language she recognized. Her fingers shook slightly as she pulled out another piece of paper, only to find more of the same, strange symbols and drawings. She could tell that these weren't ordinary letters. The excitement built inside her. This was no random box. It held something important, something that had been hidden for a long time. But as she continued to go through the papers, she noticed something even more unusual underneath, a stack of old photographs. They were in black and white, and some were slightly damaged by time, but what caught Salina's eye was the subject matter. The photos seemed to show strange symbols, much like the ones on the papers. There were also images of people she didn't recognize, standing in front of ancient-looking buildings or landmarks. Salina flipped through the photographs, feeling like she was looking at a puzzle she couldn't quite solve, and beneath the photos, there was something else, a worn map, its edges torn and faded. It seemed to point to a location near Salina's property, somewhere in the woods she had never noticed before. Her mind spun as she took in the discovery. What was this map leading to? What did the photographs mean? And why had the dog found this box in her garden? It felt like everything was connected, but she didn't know how. The dog, still sitting quietly beside her, barked softly again. Salina looked down at the dog, as if it was somehow urging her to continue. She smiled to herself. "All right," she said, taking a deep breath. "Let's see where this goes." Salina grabbed her phone and snapped a photo of the map. She was going to figure this out. There was something here, something big, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. With the dog by her side, Salina made up her mind. She was going to follow the map. She didn't know what she would find, but she felt like she had already started down a path she couldn't turn away from. Back inside her house, Salina placed the old rusted box on the kitchen counter. The dog followed her in, settling down on the floor nearby, watching her with eager eyes. Salina looked at the box again, feeling a rush of excitement. What could it possibly contain? The box was heavy, its metal cold under her fingers. The carvings on the surface were intricate, but there was no sign of a key or any obvious way to open it. The lock on the front was small but solid, as though it had been designed to keep whatever was inside safe for a long time. Salina frowned, wondering how to open it. "Well, let's see what's inside," she muttered, grabbing a butter knife from the drawer. She wasn't sure if it would work, but she didn't have many tools around for this kind of situation. Holding the knife in one hand, she tried to wedge it between the lock and the box. The dog looked up, its tail wagging, as though it were waiting for something to happen. Salina smiled at the dog. "Don't get too excited," she said softly, still trying to get the lock open. The dog tilted its head as if it understood, then lay down again, keeping a close eye on her. After a few minutes of prying, Salina finally heard a small click. The lock had given way. She felt a rush of victory and quickly lifted the clasp, opening the box. Inside, she found something unexpected. It wasn't just papers or letters as she had guessed before. Instead, there was a small bundle wrapped in faded cloth. Salina carefully pulled it out, unwrapping it slowly. Her fingers brushed against something cold and smooth, like metal, but heavier. She pulled the cloth away completely, revealing what looked like a stone, an odd, glowing stone. It was about the size of a small apple, and it seemed to pulse faintly with light. Salina stared at it in amazement, her heart racing. How was this possible? She had never seen anything like it. The dog stood up, walking over to her. It sniffed at the stone and then let out a soft bark, its tail wagging faster than ever. Salina glanced down at the dog, confused. The dog had been the one to dig up the box, and now it seemed to be reacting to the stone. "Do you know what this is?" Salina asked the dog, her voice low. Of course the dog didn't answer, but its excited behavior made her think it might understand something she didn't. Salina held the stone in her hands, feeling a strange energy coming from it. It wasn't like anything she had ever felt before. There was a sort of warmth radiating from the stone, and as she looked at it more closely, she noticed faint markings running along its surface. "What is this?" she whispered, her mind racing with possibilities. Was it a treasure? An artifact from another time? Or something far more mysterious? The dog barked again, as if urging her to do something. Salina didn't know why, but she felt an urge to hold the stone up to the light. When she did, the faint glow from the stone seemed to get brighter, illuminating the room in a soft, eerie light. Salina stood there for a moment, transfixed. The dog sat quietly, watching her intently. She could feel the stone's power, as though it was meant for something or someone. "Well, this just got interesting," she said, her voice filled with wonder. The adventure she had stumbled upon had just begun, and she knew there was more to uncover. But the first step was clear. This stone held secrets, and she was determined to find out what they were. With the stone in her hand and the dog by her side, Salina felt ready to explore whatever mystery lay ahead. Salina held the glowing stone in her hands, her heart racing with excitement. The stone pulsed softly, as though it had a life of its own. She couldn't stop staring at it, wondering what it could mean. The dog, still sitting by her side, seemed as interested as she was, its eyes fixed on the stone. "What do you think, huh?" Salina murmured to the dog, though she knew it couldn't answer. The dog wagged its tail slowly, as if to say it was eager for Salina to figure it out. Salina walked over to the kitchen counter and placed the stone carefully next to the old rusted box. She ran her fingers over the stone's smooth surface again, trying to make sense of the strange markings etched into it. They seemed like a language she didn't recognize, and she wondered if there was a clue hidden in them. She couldn't keep her thoughts in order for long. The stone's glow seemed to call to her, and she couldn't ignore it any longer. There had to be something more to this, something beyond the glowing stone and strange markings. After a moment of hesitation, Salina decided to go back to the box. She picked it up again and for the first time noticed something odd. The inside of the lid was lined with soft velvet, but what really caught her attention was a small, faintly glowing symbol in the center. It looked like a pattern that might match the markings on the stone. Salina's fingers traced the symbol gently. As she did, she felt a tiny shift in the air, like a faint breeze. The stone seemed to hum softly in her hands, almost as if reacting to the box. She set the stone down next to the box and turned it around, checking every inch. To her surprise, she found a small groove along the side of the box. The groove was just wide enough for the stone to fit into. Salina's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Was the stone meant to fit inside the box? With trembling hands, she picked up the stone and gently slid it into the groove. The moment the stone clicked into place, the room seemed to brighten for a split second, and the soft hum became louder. Salina's eyes widened as she looked down at the box, now glowing faintly in the dim light. The dog, sensing something had changed, stood up and walked over to Salina. It sat by her feet, staring at the box with a strange intensity. Salina could feel the energy in the room change, as if the box and the stone had activated something. Without warning, the box creaked open. The lid lifted slowly, revealing a hidden compartment beneath it. Salina gasped. Inside, there was something far more surprising than she had imagined. A small scroll wrapped in aged leather. Salina carefully unrolled the scroll, her hands shaking with excitement. The paper was old and fragile, but the writing on it was clear. It was in the same strange language as the markings on the stone. She held the scroll up to the light, trying to make sense of the text. It seemed to describe a long-forgotten legend, a story about hidden treasures and a secret path. The words on the scroll spoke of a treasure that was meant to be found only by someone who had the key, someone who was chosen. Salina's mind raced as she read the words. The more she read, the more she realized that the map she had found earlier was part of a much larger puzzle. The stone, the box, and now the scroll, they were all connected. The dog barked softly, almost as if it understood the importance of what Salina had just uncovered. She looked at the dog, feeling a sudden, strong sense of purpose. The dog had led her to the box, and now it was clear that the dog was part of the mystery. It had been guiding her all along. "This is just the beginning," Salina whispered to herself, looking at the dog. "We're about to find something big." With the scroll in her hands, Salina felt the weight of the discovery. She had uncovered something that could change everything, but she knew there was still more to find. The map and the scroll were just the first pieces of the puzzle, and she was determined to follow the clues wherever they led. The dog barked again, as if agreeing with her. Together, Salina and the dog were about to embark on a journey that would uncover secrets buried for centuries. Salina sat at the kitchen table, the old scroll unfurled in front of her. The strange symbols on the paper were still a mystery, but the map was clear. It showed her land, with landmarks she recognized, but it also pointed to a spot deep in the woods she had never seen before. The marked area seemed to indicate something hidden, something important. Salina studied the map closely, her finger tracing the path. It looked like the treasure or secret the map spoke of was in the woods, far beyond the usual trails. She glanced over at the dog, still lying nearby, tail wagging. The dog seemed to understand the significance of the map. "Is this where we're going?" Salina asked, though she didn't expect an answer. The dog just looked back at her, his gaze calm and focused, as though waiting for her to make the next move. With the dog by her side, Salina decided to follow the map. She grabbed her jacket and boots, feeling a sense of urgency. Whatever was hidden in the woods had been waiting there for a long time. She had to see it for herself. The dog got up and trotted over to her, ready for the journey. Without a second thought, Salina picked up the map and headed out of the house, with the dog following closely behind. As they walked through the garden and onto the path leading into the woods, Salina felt a strange mix of excitement and curiosity. The trees grew denser as they ventured deeper into the forest, and the air grew cooler. The dog, leading the way, moved quickly, darting between the trees, sniffing the ground. Salina followed, glancing at the map every few steps. The markings on the trees, though faint, seemed to match the path shown on the map. It was as if someone had gone before her, leaving a trail to follow. The deeper they went, the more Salina realized this wasn't just a random walk in the woods. The dog was guiding her, and the map was leading them somewhere important. The strange markings on the trees, the way the dog reacted, everything seemed connected. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a small clearing. The trees parted, revealing an area full of overgrown vines and stone pillars. It looked abandoned, but something about it felt different, almost as though it had been waiting for someone to find it. The dog stopped and looked back at her, its tail wagging in anticipation. Salina approached the clearing, her heart racing with excitement. There, half buried in the dirt, were the stone pillars, covered with the same strange symbols she had seen on the box. Kneeling down, she brushed away the dirt and vines from one of the pillars. Her breath caught in her throat as she revealed more of the markings. They matched the symbols on the glowing stone she had found earlier. It was clear now. The stone, the box, the map, and the symbols were all part of a larger mystery. The dog barked softly, as if urging her to keep going. Salina stood up, feeling the weight of the discovery. Whatever this was, it was something big. The adventure was just beginning. She glanced around the clearing, wondering what else was hidden in this forgotten part of the woods. With the dog by her side and the map in her hand, Salina knew she was getting closer to uncovering the truth. The secret had been buried for years, but now it was finally ready to be found. Taking a deep breath, Salina followed the dog deeper into the clearing, determined to uncover the rest of the mystery. The search was far from over, and she was ready to discover what lay ahead. Salina stood in the clearing, the dog by her side, eyeing the strange stone pillars that dotted the area. The dog had led her here, and now she knew there was more to uncover. The ancient symbols on the pillars matched the markings on the glowing stone she had found earlier. Everything was connected, but how? The dog sniffed around the ground and wagged its tail, looking up at Salina. She bent down, brushing more dirt away from a nearby pillar, uncovering a faint engraving. "This place is definitely hiding something," she murmured, but she wasn't sure what it was. Determined, Salina stood up and scanned the area. There had to be something more. She pulled out the map from her pocket, studying it again. The spot marked on the map was right here in this clearing, but it still didn't explain the full significance of the location. "Come on," Salina said, looking at the dog. "Let's see what else we can find." The dog seemed to understand, trotting ahead, leading her to another part of the clearing. They reached a large, flat stone slab partially covered in dirt. The dog sat beside it, eyes fixed on the stone. Salina knelt down and began brushing away the earth, revealing the edges of the stone. It was solid, unlike anything she had seen before. There was a slight groove running along the sides, and as Salina ran her hand along it, she noticed faint symbols carved into the surface, the same symbols that had appeared on the box and stone. "This is it," she whispered. She grabbed the stone and pushed, but it didn't budge. It was heavy, sealed tightly. The dog barked softly, urging her on. Salina stood and backed up. With a deep breath, she pushed harder, using her weight to press against the stone. It shifted slightly, just enough for her to see a small opening beneath it. The air around her felt cooler, as if the earth beneath the stone had been sealed for centuries. The dog barked again, tail wagging furiously. Salina crouched down and pried the stone open, revealing a narrow underground passage. The passage looked ancient, with rough walls and a faint smell of earth and decay. "Here we go," Salina said, feeling a rush of excitement. The dog stepped forward, sniffing the air, then trotted into the darkness of the tunnel. Salina followed, her heart racing with anticipation. The flashlight in her hand illuminated the narrow path ahead. As they moved further, the tunnel began to change. The stone walls turned smoother, more refined, as if someone had carved them intentionally. Salina could feel her excitement growing. This was no ordinary tunnel. Whatever was hidden here had been deliberately concealed, possibly for centuries. The dog was ahead of her now, moving swiftly, its nose to the ground. Salina followed, stepping carefully over the uneven ground. The deeper they went, the colder it became. The air felt thick with history. Every step Salina took felt heavier, as if the weight of what lay ahead was pressing down on her. After a few more minutes of walking, the dog stopped abruptly in front of a stone door. It was much larger than any door she had ever seen, and it was covered in the same symbols from the pillars and the stone. This door seemed to be the final barrier, the last step before whatever secret lay behind it would be revealed. The dog sat, looking up at her expectantly. Salina reached out, running her fingers over the cool stone. The door was solid, but the symbols felt warm to the touch. There was a keyhole at the center. though there was no key in sight. What now? Salina wondered aloud. She pulled the glowing stone from her pocket. Feeling a pull to use it somehow, she stepped forward, holding the stone in front of the door, unsure of what would happen. The dog barked once, as if urging her to do something. With a deep breath, Salina placed the stone into the keyhole. The moment it touched, the door began to rumble, shifting slightly. She stepped back as the sound of grinding stone filled the air. Slowly the door creaked open, revealing a hidden room beyond. Salina's heart skipped a beat. The room was dark, but as her eyes adjusted, she could make out outlines of ancient artifacts lining the walls. Dust and cobwebs filled the air, but there was something unmistakable about the room. It felt like a forgotten treasure trove, waiting to be uncovered. The dog barked again, eager to move inside. Salina, still in awe, stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the hidden chamber. What lay ahead was something that could change everything. An adventure that started with a dog digging in a garden had now led her to the discovery of a lifetime. "Let's see what we found," Salina whispered, her voice filled with wonder as she stepped into the unknown. Salina stood in the hidden room, her heart racing. The stone pillars outside had led her here, but now there was something even more pressing. A stone panel in the wall, raised slightly as if it were a door waiting to be opened. The dog stood near it, watching her intently, as if it knew exactly what to do. Salina approached the panel, examining it closely. The symbols etched on it matched those she had seen before, on the stone and in the box. Her pulse quickened. This had to be the next step. She pushed against the panel, and with a soft rumble, it shifted. A narrow passageway opened in front of her. The dog barked and eagerly trotted inside, tail wagging. Salina followed, her flashlight flickering in the dark tunnel. The air was cold, and the walls were smooth, indicating someone had built it carefully. As they walked deeper, the passage became colder, the silence oppressive. The dog stopped abruptly, ears perked up. It sniffed the air, its body tense. Salina stood still, waiting for any sign of movement. The dog barked once and darted ahead. Salina followed, heart pounding. The tunnel opened into another small room, but this one was different. In the center stood a stone pedestal with a small, cloth-wrapped object on top. Salina approached it slowly, her breath catching in her throat. She carefully unwrapped the cloth and found another ornate box, identical to the one she had found in her garden. This one was even more detailed, with intricate carvings all over its surface. The symbols from the room, the stone, and the map, all of it seemed to be leading her here. The dog barked excitedly, wagging its tail, as if urging her to open the box. Salina set the box down on the pedestal, her fingers trembling. But just as she reached for it, a loud grinding sound echoed through the room. She froze, eyes darting to the source of the noise. The wall next to her shifted, revealing another stone door. This one was bigger, more elaborate, and it seemed to have been sealed for a long time. The dog growled softly, its ears flat against its head, and then looked at Salina as if to say, "It's time to go." With one final glance at the box, Salina hurried toward the newly revealed door. She had no idea what was beyond it, but she knew it was the key to everything. The dog barked again, following closely behind. Salina stepped into the next room, the door closing silently behind her. The mystery was far from over, and she was about to uncover something that could change everything. Salina stepped into the new room, the heavy stone door closing behind her with a soft thud. The space was dimly lit by the flashlight in her hand, but she could make out the outlines of more stone structures, similar to the ones in the first room. It was clear that whatever she had stumbled upon was no ordinary place. This was a hidden chamber, one that hadn't seen the light of day for centuries. The dog sniffed the air, its nose twitching. It moved forward cautiously, stepping past stone pillars that seemed older than anything Salina had seen before. She followed, her flashlight sweeping over the walls. Strange symbols were carved into the stone, some faint, others more prominent, but all of them were familiar. The same markings appeared on the box and the pedestal, confirming her suspicion that everything was connected. In the center of the room was another pedestal, but this one was larger and more elaborate. The stone was covered with symbols, some glowing faintly, and on top of it was a large ornate stone key. It looked ancient, its surface worn by time, but it was unmistakably a key, one that clearly belonged here. Salina's heart raced. This was it. The dog had led her straight to it. The key was the final piece of the puzzle. She walked slowly toward the pedestal, the dog following closely, its eyes never leaving the key. As she reached for the key, the room seemed to hum with energy. The stone key was heavy in her hand, its cool surface almost vibrating as if it were alive. When Salina picked it up, the faint glow from the symbols around the room grew brighter. She felt a pull, an undeniable urge to use the key, as if the chamber itself was waiting for her to unlock its secrets. The dog barked softly, as though encouraging her. Salina stepped back toward the stone door they had entered through, feeling the weight of the key in her palm. She knew now what she had to do. She reached the door and hesitated. The stone surface was smooth, without a handle or any obvious way to open it. The key fit perfectly into a small slot in the center of the door. As Salina turned it, the door groaned and slowly began to shift, the sound of stone grinding against stone filling the room. The dog stood back, watching intently. Salina pushed the door open, revealing what lay beyond. The passage was narrow but stretched deep into the earth. This wasn't just another room, it was the entrance to something far more significant. The key had unlocked the path forward, and now Salina was about to uncover what had been hidden for so long. The air in the passageway was colder, heavier, and there was a sense of anticipation in the air. With the dog by her side, Salina stepped forward, ready for whatever came next. The adventure had taken a new turn, and she knew that everything she had discovered so far was leading her to something that would change her life forever. With one last glance at the stone chamber, Salina moved deeper into the passage, feeling the weight of the mystery pressing forward. Salina stepped into the narrow passage, the stone door closing softly behind her. The air was colder now, and the tunnel seemed even darker than before. She flicked her flashlight on, its beam cutting through the darkness as she moved forward. The dog walked beside her, its tail low, alert to the surroundings. The passageway was tight, the stone walls rough and uneven. It felt like a path that had been forgotten for centuries, hidden away beneath the earth. The farther Salina walked, the more she felt like she was on the edge of something important, something waiting to be discovered. The dog sniffed the air, pausing every so often, as though it was familiar with the route. Salina felt a growing sense of urgency. She had been guided this far by the dog, the box, and the stone key. It was all leading her here, but to what? What was hidden beneath all this stone, and why had it been concealed for so long? After what felt like an eternity of walking through the cold, narrow passage, the tunnel opened up into a small underground room. The walls were lined with shelves, but they were covered in dust and cobwebs. It didn't look like anyone had been down here for a long time. In the center of the room, a stone pedestal stood, much like the one she had seen earlier. Salina's heart raced as she stepped closer to the pedestal. She could feel the tension in the air, like the room itself was holding its breath. The dog walked ahead, sniffing around, before sitting down in front of the pedestal, staring up at her expectantly. On top of the pedestal, something glinted in the light, a small object wrapped in faded cloth. Salina reached out, unwrapping it carefully. What she found inside made her breath catch in her throat. It was another box, similar to the one she had found in the garden, but this one was even more ornate. The carvings on it were intricate and detailed, almost as though it were a key to something far greater. Salina looked at the box, her mind racing. Was this the final piece of the puzzle? She glanced at the dog, whose eyes seemed to say, "You found it." Without wasting any more time, Salina reached out to lift the box, but the moment her fingers touched it, she heard a loud noise. The ground beneath her feet trembled slightly, and the pedestal shifted. The dog stood up, barking, as if reacting to the sudden movement. Salina stepped back, her heart pounding. The pedestal slid to the side, revealing a hidden compartment beneath it. Salina bent down, trying to steady her breath. Inside the compartment was a stack of old, weathered papers. They were covered in the same strange markings that had appeared on the stone, the box, and the map. Salina's hands shook slightly as she picked up the papers. She unfolded one of them carefully and found a map, similar to the one she had seen before, but this one was more detailed. It showed a different part of the forest, one that she hadn't noticed in her previous search. The symbols on the map matched the ones in the room, leading deeper into the unknown. The dog barked again, drawing her attention. Salina smiled at the dog, who seemed to know that this was just the beginning of what was waiting ahead. The map and the papers were just another clue, another piece of the mystery that had been buried for so long. With the new map in hand and the box safely tucked away, Salina turned to the dog. "Let's go," she whispered, feeling the thrill of the adventure surge within her. The answers were out there, waiting to be found, and with the dog by her side, Salina knew she was closer than ever to uncovering the truth. Salina held the map tightly in her hand as she carefully folded it, slipping it into her jacket pocket. The dog was by her side, sniffing the air as they moved deeper into the underground room. The hidden compartment in the pedestal had revealed something significant, a new map and papers that seemed to explain part of the mystery. But there was more to discover, and Salina knew she couldn't stop now. The room was dim, but the flashlight in her hand lit the space just enough to make out the old shelves and dusty objects. It was clear that no one had been here for years, but everything in the room seemed connected, like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be put together. Salina moved toward the far side of the room, where a large stone wall loomed. The The symbols from the stone and the box were carved into the wall here, just like the others. She ran her fingers over them, feeling the rough texture of the stone. Each symbol seemed to glow faintly under her touch, but nothing happened when she pressed them. "Come on," Salina muttered, feeling both frustrated and excited. She knew the wall held the key to unlocking the next part of the mystery. The dog barked softly, drawing her attention. It was standing near the corner of the room, sniffing at the ground. Salina walked over to the dog, curious about what had caught its attention. The dog pawed at a small stone slab in the floor, its tail wagging rapidly. Salina knelt down, brushing away some of the dust and dirt, and saw that the slab had a faint outline around it. "This is it," Salina whispered, feeling a thrill run through her. She pressed down on the stone, and with a quiet rumble, the slab shifted slightly. She pushed harder, and it slowly slid open, revealing a narrow stairwell that led downward into darkness. The dog immediately stepped forward, its ears alert, as if excited by the new discovery. Salina took a deep breath. She wasn't sure what awaited them at the bottom of the stairs, but she knew she had to keep going. With one last glance around the room, she followed the dog down the stairs. The air grew colder as they descended. The stairs creaked underfoot, the only sound in the stillness. Salina's flashlight illuminated the stone walls, revealing more carvings, more of the same symbols, leading them deeper into the mystery. The dog continued down, sniffing at the air, seemingly aware of the path ahead. Finally, the stairs ended in a large, open chamber. The walls were covered with more intricate carvings, and in the center of the room, a pedestal stood. Atop the pedestal was something that made Salina's breath catch, a large, ornate chest. The chest was made of dark wood, with golden inlays and symbols that matched everything they had seen so far. It looked ancient, and it felt important. The dog barked once, excited as it trotted over to the pedestal. Salina stood still for a moment, taking in the sight of the chest. This was it. She had followed the map, the symbols, and the dog all the way here, and now they were standing before what could be the final piece of the puzzle. With trembling hands, Salina walked up to the pedestal and gently placed her hand on the chest. The moment her fingers touched it, the room seemed to vibrate, and the air felt heavier. She hesitated for only a second before slowly lifting the chest's lid. Inside was a collection of old, dusty scrolls and a small, glowing object. The object was a stone, similar to the ones they had found earlier, but this one was different. It had a faint, soft glow and seemed to hum with energy. Salina picked it up, feeling a strange warmth spread through her fingers. She looked at the dog, who sat beside her, watching intently. "This is it," Salina whispered, realizing that everything they had uncovered had led to this moment. The chest, the stone, the scrolls. This was the secret that had been hidden for so long. The dog barked again, as if agreeing with her. Salina smiled and placed the glowing stone back into the chest. There was still much to learn, and the mystery was far from over. But this was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. The answers were right here, and she was ready to uncover them. With the dog by her side, Salina knew the journey wasn't finished. It was just beginning. Salina sat on the stone floor, the chest open in front of her. The glowing stone and the scrolls inside seemed to hold a power of their own, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. She could feel her heart pounding as she looked at the dog, who was sitting by her side, its eyes locked on the glowing stone. It almost seemed as though the dog knew the stone's significance, as if it had led her here for a reason. The dog stood up suddenly, moving toward the stone as if it understood something Salina didn't. It sniffed the stone, then placed its paw gently on it, tilting its head back to look at Salina. The stone hummed softly in response, the light growing brighter for a moment before fading. Salina blinked in surprise. The stone had reacted to the dog's touch, and she couldn't help but wonder if the dog had some kind of connection to it. She had followed the dog's lead through the garden, into the hidden rooms, and down the long passageways. It was clear now that the dog wasn't just a bystander in this mystery. It was an essential part of it. "You knew something all along, didn't you?" Salina said softly, looking at the dog. The dog barked lightly, as if to acknowledge her words, then sat back down beside her. Salina's mind raced. Why had the dog found the box? Why had it led her to this underground chamber? There had to be more to its actions than just coincidence. Salina stood up and reached for the scrolls, carefully unrolling one of them. The symbols on the scroll matched the ones on the stone, and it seemed to describe an ancient ritual, one that involved the glowing stone. As she read, Salina pieced together the story. The stone was a key, not just to the room, but to something even more powerful hidden deep within the earth. It seemed that only the right person or animal could unlock its true potential. The dog watched her as she read the scroll, its eyes steady and calm. Salina felt a sense of connection with the dog, as though it had always been part of this mystery. Perhaps the dog wasn't just a random stray, it was chosen to guide her, to lead her to this very moment. Could this be why you've been so determined? Salina asked. The dog gave a low bark, almost as if to confirm her thoughts. As she continued reading, she realized that the stone's power was tied to the land itself. It had been hidden for centuries, waiting for the right person and the right companion to unlock its secrets. The stone wasn't just a treasure, it was a key to something far bigger, something that could change the world. The dog stood up again, walking over to the chest. It sniffed around the contents, then looked back at Salina, waiting for her next move. Salina followed the dog's gaze, her eyes settling on the glowing stone. She had no idea what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. The dog had led her this far for a reason, and now they were on the edge of uncovering something far more important. "You've been guiding me the whole time," Salina whispered, her voice filled with awe. The dog barked softly, its tail wagging in response. Salina smiled. She had found more than just a treasure. She had found a true companion, a guide who had been by her side through every twist and turn of this journey. With the dog beside her, Salina knew that the mystery wasn't over yet. There was more to uncover, more to discover. But one thing was clear, the dog had been an essential part of this journey, and whatever happened next, they would face it together. Salina reached down and gently stroked the dog's fur, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She wasn't alone in this adventure anymore. With the dog by her side, she knew they were ready for whatever came next. Salina stood in the underground chamber, the glowing stone still in her hand. The dog was by her side, its eyes focused on the stone, as though it could sense something important was about to happen. Salina felt a strange energy in the air, almost as if the room itself was waiting for something to be revealed. She carefully placed the stone back on the pedestal, the markings glowing faintly around it. The moment she did, the air seemed to shift. The stone hummed softly, and the walls of the chamber began to tremble. Salina stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. The room felt alive with power. The dog barked softly, its tail wagging, as if it understood what was happening. Salina glanced at the dog, then back at the stone. She couldn't help but feel that she was on the edge of something huge, something that had been hidden for centuries. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shifted slightly, and the stone pedestal began to sink into the ground. Salina gasped as a hidden compartment opened beneath the pedestal. Inside there was a small chest, just like the one she had found earlier, but this one was different. It was more ornate, with intricate carvings and symbols she hadn't seen before. The chest seemed to glow faintly, matching the light from the stone. The dog barked again, its ears perked up, and Salina moved toward the chest. With trembling hands, she reached for it, lifting it carefully from the compartment. The moment she touched it, the room seemed to hum with energy, and the chest carvings began to glow brighter. She opened the chest slowly, revealing a collection of ancient scrolls and a large, detailed map. The scrolls were covered in the same symbols as the stone, and Salina's heart raced as she unrolled one of them. The map showed areas of the world Salina didn't recognize, places far beyond her own home, hidden in remote locations. The dog walked over to the chest and sniffed the scrolls, its tail wagging with excitement. Salina felt a deep connection to the dog in that moment. It had led her here, guided her through every step of this journey, and now it seemed like the dog knew what was next. The map seemed to indicate more locations, each one marked with the same symbols as the stone. There was a pattern, a trail to follow, leading to more hidden chambers and treasures. Salina realized this discovery was bigger than she had imagined. This wasn't just about a single treasure. It was a key to something much greater, a secret that had been buried for centuries. "Look at this," Salina whispered to the dog, her voice filled with awe. "This is bigger than we thought." The dog barked once more, then looked up at Salina as if urging her to keep going. Salina nodded, understanding. The journey wasn't over. This was just the beginning of a much larger adventure. She carefully folded the scroll back into the chest and closed it, knowing that the map held the answers to the mysteries still ahead. Salina glanced at the dog, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. They had uncovered the first layer of a hidden world, and now together, they would explore what lay beyond. She could feel the weight of what they had discovered, but she also knew there was much more to learn. With the chest in hand and the map safely tucked away, Salina turned to the dog. "Let's see where this leads us," she said, her voice full of determination. The dog barked happily and trotted forward, leading the way into the unknown. Salina followed, the excitement building within her. The adventure wasn't over, it had only just begun. With the dog by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. Salina stood at the edge of the underground chamber, the glowing chest in her hands and the map tucked safely inside her jacket. The air was thick with excitement, and her mind was racing with all the possibilities. She had uncovered more than just treasure. She had found a hidden legacy, something that had been buried for centuries, waiting for the right person to discover it. The dog sat beside her, its eyes calm but alert, as if it understood the weight of what they had found. Salina smiled down at the dog, feeling a deep connection. This journey had started with a simple stray dog digging in her garden, and now it had led her to a discovery that would change everything. The dog barked softly, as if urging her to keep moving. With a deep breath, Salina walked back toward the hidden path they had uncovered earlier, the map guiding her every step. She knew the adventure wasn't over yet. The chest and the map had opened the door to even more secrets, and she was determined to uncover them. As they made their way out of the underground chamber, Salina thought about everything they had discovered so far. The glowing stone, the ancient symbols, the secret rooms, it all pointed to something bigger than she could have imagined. It was a mystery that spanned generations, hidden for a reason, and now Salina and the dog were the key to unlocking it. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but Salina felt ready. With the dog by her side, she knew they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. She looked down at the map again, tracing her finger over the locations marked on it. There were more places to explore, more secrets to uncover, and more answers to find. As they made their way through the forest, the dog led the way, as it always had. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the trees. Salina took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air and the weight of everything they had uncovered. "This is just the beginning," Salina said quietly, more to herself than to the dog. The dog barked in agreement and trotted ahead, tail wagging. Salina smiled and followed. The adventure was far from over, and with the dog by her side, she knew they were ready for whatever came next. Together, they would continue to uncover the secrets that had been hidden for so long, unlocking the legacy that had been waiting for the right moment to be discovered. With a final glance at the glowing stone and the chest that had started it all, Salina walked forward, eager for the next chapter of the journey. The mystery was just beginning, and she was ready to face it head-on, with the dog guiding her every step of the way.